This is the Swarm's chatbot demo. It's our RAG-enabled chatbot built using Swarm's agents, and it uses local LLMs using vLLM, Firecrawl, Redis for vector storage. So we're going to walk through how to start it up. It's pretty simple. We want to open in Studio, and you have to have an account with Lightning AI, but there's free accounts that have GPU credits that you can use. If you open a free account, you can get I think 20 free GPU credits. It used to be 50, but whatever. Anyways, you get a free one. Start a free account. All you gotta do is open up the Studio. It'll duplicate Studio. That'll take some time. And essentially, a Studio is kind of like having a persistent laptop or a VM just somewhere. It's just a persistent machine that you can switch from CPU to GPU. It'll by default. I'm not sure if it's going to pick GPU by default because I picked that as a requirement, but that's optional. You can switch to CPU and then have a free Studio because that's part of the Lightning AI deal is that there's like a free CPU VM that you can use, and then you can switch over to GPU. Usually the Studio is first open in CPU mode, and you have to pick a GPU that you want to run on. But you can set up a Studio to require a GPU. Right now, I'm set up to just require CPU because if you're going to do vector storage processing, you can do that just on CPU if you want. But if you want to do inference with a bigger model, you need GPU. And even with the 8 billion parameter Llama 3 model, you need to have enough RAM. So I'm using a Studio to show how to run everything together with vLLM, which is a scalable inference engine that allows you to queue up chat requests and responses and handle scale. It runs on Linux machines, so this is one of the reasons why I'm using a Studio, because I could run this in Docker locally if I want as well, or in WSL on Windows. But this is one of the reasons why I use this GPU or use Studios, is because you can switch to GPUs anytime you want. You can also set up so that if there's an external request made to a public API endpoint, because you can make public API endpoints using Studios, that it will spin up a VM that if it's inactive. And you can set up a startup script. I'll show some of that. So it takes a while to duplicate the Studio, but what it's doing is setting up a persistent disk and setting up a machine for you. As it loads up, take a look around. I have to wait until the Studio is completely finished loading. Here's the loading bar. But again, you can pick a Studio environment. You can switch to GPU, which we're going to have to do in a minute. Because we want to run a model fully on GPU right now for demonstration purposes, and to be able to handle the Llama 3 model that we want to load. You can kind of ignore these main files. These are just, I'm going to actually change this so that it's just a README in this repo, the top level, because the actual code is in Swarms, Playground, Demos, Chatbot UI, and Server. This is the API server. We want to get it running first, and part of that is it needs vLLM running. So now we're fully loaded, but we're on a free CPU machine, which is good for doing vector storage operations. Like I can process the vector storage like manually by running this page right here, or running this Python script. If you run this main, it'll run vector storage on its own. It'll crawl against a URL that you give it. But it's also starts up with the server the first time. It's already been crawled on my machine, but it hasn't on this machine. So it's going to do a crawl the first time that the server starts up. But all the dependencies are in place on this machine. We don't have to like install anything. What we do is run the scripts to do the startup. So part of what we need to do, there's a README file. That talks about how it's split up into API server and UI right now. This points to what we have to do, the README files for each of them. So to start up the API server, we'll read that README, which is in the server folder. So the Chatbot server, we have to install Redis and Firecrawl, which is already installed on this machine. So instead, all we have to do actually is make sure that it runs on this machine on GPU mode once we switch over to GPU. So let's switch to GPU, and we pick an L. What we do is pick an L4 with number of GPUs is 1. For this, this is big enough to handle, and it takes 0.7 credits per hour. I'll confirm that machine, and it will request this machine. And it'll be ready in a minute. It says how long it'll be ready. Usually it'll be a bit faster, but it has to load the disk again. Now we switch machines. And again, we have to wait till it loads up, sets up the machine. Well, this is one of the benefits of Lightning AI is that you can develop in a CPU environment in a free CPU and then switch over to GPU if you need to. And you can run your vector storage on CPU only if you really want to. But it is faster on GPU because of the embedding generation. It'll take advantage of GPU if you use it on GPU. So that's what we're going to do this time. So we're going to make sure that everything is installed properly on this. We're going to make sure that it's actually enabled. We'll see if it's installed at all. Just make sure that in a new studio we can do so you can do a new terminal like this in Visual Studio and try to enable Stack Server. It says it doesn't exist, right? So what we have to do is install it on this machine because it hasn't been installed on this machine yet. It's not persistent. If you get this message, it means the studio is not ready yet. You just try again when it's ready. It should be ready. The progress bar is done. Oh well, keep trying. Now we go. It's already its newest version, so it's because the disk wasn't set up. That's why. Okay, it actually was enabled or installed. So we just have to make sure that it's actually started. I think it probably actually was once the disk was set up. And now we want to make sure that we set up Firecrawl to actually do, this is actually what will parse the Markdown pages. And to do that, we cd into this directory and run workers. And this takes a little while to spin up. And while this starts to run, I'll just make sure it starts. While this starts to run, we open up another terminal. Just to keep track, I can rename this terminal workers for Firecrawl workers. I'll start up another terminal and I'll cd into Firecrawl apps API again, and this time run the pmp and run start command, which starts the API. So they have like some workers that talk to Redis, and they have an API that is exposed that we can talk to through Python library. That's what this vector storage library is doing. This old vector store, I left the code in here just because it still might be useful in the future, but it uses LangChain. We're not dependent on LangChain anymore, and all the requirements are already installed on this machine, but I have to update the requirements text. Anyways, now we need to make sure that the vLLM is actually running. The first time that you start up a new machine, it doesn't have the Docker at all. So what you would do is crack open, go to cd swarms, playground, demos, chatbot, server. Okay, and you run this script here, docker, run vLLM shell. So I'll go to that file in a second, but what right here, what it's doing is you can see the script right now. What it's doing, so it's setting up the NVIDIA GPUs. It's going to use all GPUs that are available. There's only one on this particular selected host. You put your Hugging Face token, which is my Hugging Face token, which I'll have to change after this. But the it uses that's actually my Hugging Face token, so I'm obviously gonna have to invalidate it. But I need to use it for this demo. And this is the model that you want to use from Hugging Face, and this is the one. So this is the one I'm using right now. Although I might upgrade this to 3.1 later. So this is the vLLM that you're gonna pull down, and you can pull down multiple, and have the models selected, which one you want to use at runtime, because vLLM will return the models listings that it has at a models endpoint. But this is the one model that I'm going to use for this demo. So it's going to extract a Docker, pull down the Docker image that's pre-built. And one of the reasons why you want to use Docker images, vLLM is a pain to build. You got to set everything up, all the C++ libraries and the new compiler and everything else. So it's much simpler to just pull down via Docker. This particular studio actually has a vLLM source code repository here because I was going to make some changes to it, but it's not necessary anymore. So I'm going to remove it later. A lot of this stuff is not necessary anymore. There's another example in here of doing agents with the vLLM. That's what this code does. It'll run agents with run an agent using vLLM if you set it up. but we're not here to demonstrate that. So I'm going to remove this from the code base later, I think. Our main interest is in swarms, and I did some minor edits to Firecrawl that for Markdown links that might be necessary, but the real code is all in swarms for this particular studio. Like in Firecrawl, I made a minor change in the API or in the service. Okay, so now actually what we see is actually it's running now. vLLM is running. So it was able to, the script starts up the whole vLLM and it's actually waiting now for requests. Okay, so we don't have to worry about starting and stopping unless we actually do that, but we run the Docker shell command, the Docker run vLLM shell command, and it actually starts up vLLM. So that's running on port 8000 right now locally and shouldn't be really exposed to the outside world. So, because authentication is not enabled. Now we can start up the server app. We can use UVcorn server app port 888 to start it up if we want. Let's rename this vLLM. And let's rename this one Firecrawl API. And make a new terminal. Okay, so what we really want to do is we want to go to swarms, playground, chatbot, playground demos rather, chatbot, server. And we can actually just open the folder through here as well. So it's actually under this studio, swarms, playground, demos. It's better to do it like this so VS Code in the cloud can actually see it. I can connect via SSH as well, by the way, to have like cursor or VS Code connect remotely via SSH. But for now, we're just going to show the web version. So I can open this folder, and then VS Code will actually do IntelliSense properly for my Python environment. But the terminals that we have started are still running, but they're running in the background. See, now they have like names. So we open a new terminal to that to this location, and now we want to start the server. So, but we can start it like through a debug mode, or we can start UVcorn. There's two different ways to do that. This one we use fast APIs. Like if I go to here, there's like two configurations. One will use UVcorn to start up in debug mode, and the second one will use fast API. It just depends, because I found like I had problems with UVcorn finding errors, but fast API found like more module errors initially. But like we can pick just this and start in the debugger if we want to. And if Firecrawl started up, she'll start the vector storage, but we'll see if it's this is the server code. So now it's actually parsing the vector, doing the vector storage operations. So this is the Redis vector storage that it's doing. What it's doing is it's parsing all of the documentation URLs from Swarms world, docs.swarms.world. And that's controllable by the server Pi. When we create up the vector storage, we do the crawl of the URL. The URL is set as hard-coded right here to just do the Swarms documentation. So it's not parameterized right now. I'm planning on parameterizing it through the chat API, but since it takes a while to do the vector storage, the reg operations, we want to kind of do it before the inference engine is running or run it in the background, right? But so I'm doing this at startup right now. It doesn't take that long to do anymore. It used to take a long time using my other method. The old-fashioned way took 4 hours. This one takes more like 4 minutes. I haven't timed it actually, but it's a lot faster. As you can see, it's done actually. So we processed most of the major documentation in Swarm's platform, and now that that's initialized, the URL should be available. So you'll see what happens is that there's actually API builder, and there's a port viewer, and there's a reactive web app UI. So what we want to do is make sure that the vLLM port can be running that's port 8000, so our inference engine will work, and the API on port 888. Enable that port. The rest of these are actually legacy, and it's kind of surprising that they hung around. They should have been deleted. They don't show up in my UI, so I'm surprised they showed up there. This is like, we want to make sure that this API works. We can go to settings and we can check the URL, and it's not working. So there's a problem with the chatbot, right? Why? We'll see. It might not be fully initialized yet. It's running in debug mode. Make sure there's no exceptions. I'll just check to make sure. This is 502, so it's like it doesn't recognize the app at all. Oh, yeah, there's we want to make sure that the port 888 is forwarded, I think. So hold on, just let me check that. No, that's not the reason. So I want to make sure that everything loads properly. This is vLLM. So the API is not responding because of something I did wrong. I'm just going to actually set the debugger to see if it's actually even loading. For some reason, it's not working with UVcorn. I'll pick Fast API 2 instead, and then I'll start it. We'll see what's going on. This uses Fast API's main class. We'll see if that will actually pick up the problem. We might have to do a module install or something like that. But because it's a persistent disk, it should have copied over everything that was required, I think. Yeah, you notice it is running. Okay, so, okay, now if I go back over to the port and do a reload, still loading. Okay, now it should be enabled. Let's go back here again to make sure it's the right one. It's a different machine name. There. Okay, sorry, now it's running. Okay, so use the Fast API or the startup. For some reason, the UVcorn one is having problems. I don't know. But if I go to docs, there's a post endpoint here. You can try it out. You can change the message here, but it's got default set up already. And you could change the model if you know the model's different, but by default it's picking the default model that I have set up with a default prompt. So I can just execute this to see if I get a successful response, to make sure the API is running. And we can see it returns sources. Now, I have to mention right now that there's a bug right here that so there seems to be a problem with the vector storage parsing and everything, but they actually had you can see it processed the documentation. I didn't get a great answer this time, but it does. But at least it's doing the RAG parsing. This is partly the vector storage, like how we slice the documents and how you do it. We can improve, but notice there's a bug here. The agent's returning. We're returning the response twice. It's not running twice, although it can be set up to run multiple times and return multiple answers. I'll show you that in a minute. But I have a bug where it's returning the answer twice, so it's a known issue right now. But the next step is to set up the Chatbot UI. So the Chatbot UI, if I go back to Visual Studio Code, I can open up a new server if I want to open up a new window. So I'll duplicate the window. And you'll notice that when you duplicate the window, it'll actually default back to the main directory. So you got file, open folder, the studio, swarms, playground, demos, Chatbot, Chatbot UI. So this is the Chatbot UI project. Now this came from GitHub. It's an open source Chatbot UI, which I've used before for another product. But it's got some modifications specifically to handle server-side streaming events, and so I have my own fork of it. So there's been quite a bit of changes to support what I've changed. It was really made just for OpenAI, and it wasn't really made for local models, so I changed the back end quite a bit, how it uses the back end. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that this is started, but we don't want to start it. We can start it up the traditional way, but I have like, what you do is you want to create a React app. You can select a studio file. It takes a while to load the directory. Go into swarms again. We have to wait for the directory to load. This directory browser is kind of horrible. But yeah, because like we still can't see. There's Playground. It finally loaded. Playground, demos, Chatbot, Chatbot UI. So we just want to point to this directory, and we can see over here that it's CD'd to the right directory, and it's going to run. But we want to make sure that it runs on the right port. We're running on port 3000, I think. And you can set up auto start as well. This is going to be the chatbot, called the Chatbot UI. We might have to do npm install, but like I said, it's copied over a persistent disk. So if everything was installed in node modules before when you copy the studio, then it'll be fine. But if you get the 404 not found, then we can see there's a problem. So we go back here and make sure npm install is run, or use yarn. Yarn's not there, so let's just use npm install. It's always up to date, so there's something else wrong. Actually, it's usually just the startup. Here we go, logs. It's running. It's just taking a little bit while to run. So we'll just go back up again here to UI. And now it's running. Yeah, it just took a little bit longer to start up. So we can restart it if we need to. We can have a public link if we want. And this public link is basically not known by anybody, right? But it's publicly exposed because we chose to. So if I do that public link or open, here we go. This is the public link. So this is actually hosted now, right? And it's publicly available to whoever wants to use it. This can actually be a custom domain. If you set up your domain provider to point to it and you set up a custom domain in the UI, then it can be SwarmsBot documentation if you want to. And we can change the CSS or whatever, or embed this into Swarms marketplace or something. But we want to do like a new chat. First of all, what we want to do is set the OpenAI key, since we're running vLLM, to empty with capitals, empty, capital empty. So that's EMPTY capitals. And I'll just save that. Yeah, and once I do that, I can refresh. And it should use vLLM now. Because initially it's going to look for OpenAI key and it won't be able to fetch the models. I might have to restart completely. I wonder why it didn't. I think this is because I don't have port 8000 open. Yeah, that's why. Okay, so this is what port viewer. Or API builder. Make sure 8000 is okay. 8000 is available. 888's available. Oh yeah, it's because this actually has to be available. So because that's where it's going to get the models, and it says there's a problem right now. So the reason why is because we didn't open a port. So if I go back here to ports. I believe that's part of the problem. Okay, it's running. Models. Let's go back to Chat UI. You can see it's going to try to run the models every few seconds. Oh, this is because we don't have an M file set up. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, so this is part of the problem, is that we don't have an envelope. Oh yeah, we do have an envelope. It copied over my envelope. This is wrong. Yeah, this is supposed to be this one right here. This is where all the keys are set up by default. These are the right URLs and default model. This prompt is wrong. I wonder. I think that. Oh yeah, you know why? Is because we've got to pull. That's because I made some changes. I wonder why I didn't change this. Oh, because mlocal is not stored. So you got to go back to the example. This is like this should have been edited. I think I just messed up the submodule connection there. Let me just modify that prompt to make sure that's correct. And I'll make sure that these are the same. Oh, it's updating. I think server environment's not set up right. So we're back at server environment. I'll make sure there's the M file set up properly. Looks okay to me because it copies over the M file in the studio. That's one of the things I have to be careful of with the Hugging Face API keys. When you share a studio. It actually hit that part's working. So the model's part's working too. It's just that for some reason so why is this API call failing? There's something that I did wrong here. I think there's part of the problem right here. I didn't commit some changes that need to be. This is for default model. Now let me check again. What's going on with that? Okay, so I actually had made those changes, I just didn't sync them. Sorry about that. Now I have like to restart the restart the entire chatbot. UI, the chatbot UI. Why would I have trouble fixing models right now? In order to debug that, I can go my local. I can do chatbot UI localhost. This is completely local now, and I'm debugging it. I have to wait for the debugger to disconnect because it was already connected. Oh, no. Okay, the reason why is because the actual URL has changed. Okay, so I'm sorry. All right, look at the URL. This is the actual URL now, because you have a different studio. Sorry, my fault. My mistake. So what we want to do is switch over to back to the VS Code example and change this to the right URL. That's what the problem is. Okay, so that one. So the other server just depends on port 8000 localhost, but this all has to be changed to the right server name. Does that even change? Yeah, it did change. Okay, we want to make sure that these URLs actually work. So it's actually v1 models, it will find it. Yeah, okay. That's one of them. And 8888. There, that's fine. Okay, good. So that was the problem, is just setting that up in the environment local. Okay, now that will require restarting the chatbot UI, but we'll see. Yeah, it loaded now. Okay, so that was the main problem. So now we can see that there's one model available. That's the default, and it has the default prompt. And we can set the temperature, but I don't think the temperature is actually being used properly right now. So just you can ignore that if you want. We're gonna be like, how do I install swarms, and see if it brings back the right documentation. Streaming response is not quite working the way it's supposed to be working right now, but I'm working on it. So you can see it replied twice, which is kind of a pain. But right now, I'm working on that bug. So actually, it brought back information about what to do. So here it actually gave source URLs. So you can see that that worked. I could be like, what's the Python code to create an agent in Swarms? Yeah, I said it didn't find any, but it actually gave the documentation. I think part of the reason why it's not giving this is because I'm not adding the context right to the question. Right now I'm adding just the context. So we can actually change this in the server to be possibly better by adding the context to the question properly. But I found that it was like adding too much garbage. So I'm trying to improve this anyways, but it should give us some code example. It's able to if I actually give it the context properly. I think I can fix this like right now. See how it says doesn't find an example? Well, okay, so let's, if I switch over to here where this is the server code again. So if I go back to Chatbot server, you can just look in here. Part of the problem is that the prompt is not using the whole doc retrieval string. It's using just the content from the question. So I want to change this to do doc retrieval string, and it's going to be a bigger prompt every time that will include the context that it retrieved. So this was something I was trying to tweak. I'll just change that right now, and what will happen is that this will reload in a second. It should reload. If it doesn't, I'll just restart it. Yeah, here we go. It's reloading. And now we'll go back to the chatbot. I'm going to try to regenerate response. Yeah, so I'm going to start a new chat because I don't know if it's grabbing the context right. So I'm going to say, how do I create an agent in Swarms? Because I don't want it to get confused from the previous conversation history where it said it couldn't find it. It actually does have custom. I don't think this was parsed properly. That's probably a problem. I'm still working on the vector storage, tweaking the vector storage. It's probably, maybe it's the chunk size. It could be something else. But it did give back the documentation, which is interesting. Oops. I'll try again. So I actually tried. It actually did grab the code snippet. See, that's actually pretty interesting, I think. We'll see that. Check to see if it actually works. Agent registry. Honestly, I think that's pretty cool. I don't know. Right now, if you create a new prompt, you can like save your prompts here. I want to connect this up to the prompt marketplace in Swarms, and hopefully connect up to agents as well, that you can actually run. And right now, this would be like the default agent is just the Swarms documentation agent, I guess. So if you wanted it, so that's I guess that's the walkthrough for and some troubleshooting steps that you might need to do to get this working on your own. Like I said, this could be a publicly hosted, and you can set your own domain name and everything, and have a chatbot run against your documentation. Your own documentation if it's a Markdown. The Firecrawl supports crawling HTML in general, but I specially constructed vector storage code to parse out Markdown. Some of that code is in, well, all the code's in vector storage class right here. It's using the Redis client and Hugging Face text vectorizer, which will take advantage of GPU. If you're running on GPU, like you saw, it's much faster. And we set up an index for Redis. And we extract Markdown links, and we're doing a check. We're splitting the Markdown into 5,000 characters, but by paragraph. That's the current chunking strategy. There could be many different chunking strategies for this. We could chunk by heading. Like that could be something that be changed. And it stores it uses the storage in Redis and or Redis, whatever. I did a recursive crawl, but I was like blowing the stack, so we'll do an iterative version instead. Now, right now, it's only doing the main parts of the pages. So, if you really wanted to crawl like each heading separately and do a smaller chunk, you could do it in the vector store and you might get better results, like if it actually stores each heading separately. But right now it's going page by page, which I think is like a lot faster. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done to improve this stuff, but hopefully this will give you an idea what to do. It can run on CPU if you want to, but it has to be a Linux box and you have to have enough RAM. And you use a different Docker command to set up vLLM. You have to check the vLLM docs for that, because I'm not going to walk through that right now. And right now, that's, I think, pretty much covers everything. You can change the prompts, the server prompts that are used are all inside server prompts here. and some of them might be added to the prompt directory on. But these are all the prompt templates that are used right now. I don't have to use these delimiters because vLLM will take care of it, actually, because it knows how to do that. And I can actually just get rid of this class because we don't depend on LangChain anymore, but or ChromaDB. But this whole old vector storage class is actually used to parse out local files. So I'm still going to keep the code there for now. And it used to use async parent document retriever. It splits chunks into parent documents and smaller chunks. So you might get better results if we use the parent document retriever, but it's dependent on LangChain, and I wanted to remove the LangChain dependencies. So yeah, where's the main agent code is all run here, and we get back sources as well, as you notice. I make sure that it's appended to the yielded response. But the thing is what's weird here is that it's yielding the message back twice. I think it's because run async does metadata output, and metadata output is getting streamed out as well. And so it's actually like, if you notice, here's the printed output from the async. It's outputting, it's streaming out a response twice because it's doing metadata output as well, and I have to like fix a bug in that because we don't need to output it twice. There's like one actual streaming response is supposed to be done in loop 101, but then we have the saving metadata, loading step metadata. And if it works, when it does the streaming, it is outputting as well, which is kind of weird. It's just a bug that I need to figure out before we can actually use this in production, I think, So, but the one of the cool things is that you can actually get the agent to return multiple answers if you want it. Here it's set up max loops to 1. We can set the dynamic temperature as well if we want to. And the context length is set. This is where the main agent runs. But it's important to like run the vector storage to get the documents and embed them into context somehow. I think I can improve the prompt quite a bit so it understands context and the chat history a little bit better. So one of those ways to do that is I'll go back to new chat. Well, I'll take like the whole prompt. It doesn't need the quotation marks. It should have been, I think it's taking the quotation marks directly from the M file. Let's make a new prompt. And I'm just going to wrap this in tags because it seemed to work better before when I made sure that they were delimited. This is like one of the things that we have to like try out over and over again. Is improving the prompts. So I'll try that. I'll be like, now I'll try to be like, how do I create, how do you create an agent using Swarm's framework? Let's see if it gets a better answer than on the one shot, like that it did before. So you can see two answers again, but to create an answer using Swarm's framework, you follow these steps: create an account, explore the dashboard, generate AI keys. This is like different. This is talking about the Swarm's platform. We want to say like, give me example in Python. Example in Python. We'll see if it uses the history. Highly simplified example. Okay, I'd say this is a hypothetical example. This is not right at all. Yeah, that didn't work. So I'm gonna actually, I'll be improving this quite a bit to try to, like, this seemed to actually, this prompt maybe didn't help. So let's try the default prompt again. Be like, how do I create a Swarms agent using Python? Just not as good examples as some have had, because like we had like a lot better examples. So yeah, I'll work on improving this, but this is the end of the example walkthrough for now. Hope that it ends up being useful. Certainly is one of the easiest examples to get running for a RAG bot that you'll find out there, I think, even though we ran into just a few environmental setup issues for duplicating Studio. It's one of the fastest ways you probably get started doing RAG if you really want to nowadays. So that's the end of that. Let me end the recording, if I can figure out how to end the recording.